Hi, Meg. How are you?
I'm doing great. Let's see, it's snowy as heck outside today. We had like 6 or 7 inches just dump on us yesterday. So I'm living in a little bit of a winter wonderland. And weirdly enough, we haven't had a lot of snow this year. It's like the first actual snowfall.
Are you
So
happy or are you sad?
I'm happy today. And then once the snow gets melty and gross, it's sad.
I get it. Fair enough. I mean, fair enough. I kind of feel like everyone got, well, then again, it happens every year. We get excited for spring and then we get hit by the second wave of winter and it was like fake spring. And then you get hit by reality and then you're like, oh yeah, it's not spring
Yeah,
yet.
it's not really spring. I know where I live, we will get like winter vortexes or like bomb cyclones of snow. Like they use that language over here
Okay.
in March.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, we've had that a few times here, but not very often. And what's actually interesting is that we've actually been hit by a wave, but just cold and blue skies. So I'm not against it. But it is weird because a week and a half ago, it was basically spring weather. And it was like, oh, nice. And then suddenly over the weekend, it just turned. And now it's proper cold, but it's not snowing and it's not raining. So I'm good with it because I like seeing the blue skies and you don't like it when I swear, but we had a really good friend that would always say, don't bitch about the sun. And I loved it because it was a good reminder to just be like, you know what? Take the good thing out of it.
Oh
if
my
it's
God.
sunshiny, just take it.
I was just going to add, as an adult, I am starting to distinguish like, yes, it's going to be cold and snowy, but if it's sunny, it's still a beautiful day, right? So if it's freezing out, but we have beautiful sun, it's still important to get outside and like be outside in the sun a little bit and just, it feels good and uplifting, even if it's cold. The sun is like the thing.
It's so crazy how many of us are truly impacted by just a simple thing, like as simple as the weather. Like everyone has a better day. My husband is grumpy, so grumpy when it's like 3 days of gray weather. Like he will literally sit on the couch and be like, there's no sun. But I mean, at least he's honest about it because it's not like he's not trying to find another reason to be grumpy. So I appreciate that. But it's so crazy how impacted we are by it. And actually, it also reminded me of two things. I'm sorry, I'm going to go off on random tangents here. The first one is not directly related to recovery, but I was taking a walk 2 days ago, 3 days ago, I can't remember, to my local little park. And there's like a little pond and the pond has little ducks. So I love it because I don't know, I think it's really cute. But also, like I got to it and then I was like, oh, wow, it's so pretty. And I was like, the water is beautiful. And, and then I realized that like I was walking and just my brain was churning. And then I realized the water's the actual same water as the week before and 2 weeks earlier and whatnot. But it had been like gray and, gloomy in terms of weather. And so I hadn't noticed, like I hadn't had that, oh, wow, like, ooh, it's pretty. Like I didn't have that, oh, I'm going to pull out my phone and take a picture because that's how cute it is sort of a thing. And that's silly because the water didn't change. Like the water is the same water, but the thing around the water changed and it made the water blue and pretty and reflective and like magical, like it feels like it's shimmering and all that. And it's, you feel like everything's more beautiful and nice, but the nature of the pond hasn't changed. It's just that the weather changed. And I was like, I don't know. It was a random thought, but it stuck with me for the rest of the walk because I was like, how often am I doing that to myself in life where I forget about the fact that certain things haven't changed. It's just that the context, the weather, the mood, like my season has changed, but some fundamentals haven't. And maybe I've just forgotten about it. Does that make sense? Am I making any sense?
I think that's a really cool thought. I've never thought about water in ponds like that before. Like, I know it's the same water, like it's like a no duh kind of a thing. But then when you realize it can be strikingly beautiful one day and kind of blah, gross looking the next day, and it's the same exact water, it's just the environment that's changed. It's pretty mind-blowing to like think about how like context can transform something, which is interesting. It just makes me think, how does this apply to humans? And then I start to think, well, think about people who grow up in challenging, difficult environments, right? Like they're the same core human, and it's harder for them based on their environment to really shine and like be their best self, because the context, the environment's more challenging, right? It's like being a pond in the winter.
On a gloomy winter day, or
Yeah.
or the same human, like I feel like sometimes I let my overwhelmed, overthinking brain start telling stories about how everything's gloomy and dark, and it's sort of like latching on to the weather that is maybe outside of my control even, and it's making me forget what is within me already, like however you want to call it, like your higher self, soul self, like whatever, and everything that is still true in my life, but it's making me forget about it just because the weather is gray, like in not literal sense.
Yes, it's like you're forgetting the beauty within yourself and focusing on the grayness. And
that was a random thought.
Wow, beautiful.
From blue skies. Okay, I have another thought because of blue skies, and I'm going to try not to make it too long. But when I was unwell, every time the sky was blue, my brain transformed that into, you have to go outside. You have to enjoy the weather. You know what I mean? Like, have you ever experienced that? I had that so much. Like, it was actual torture sometimes. And I really had to make peace with the fact that the weather can be nice, and it can be still a better idea to let my bum be on the couch because I need to heal or rest and not be outside. And I can enjoy the fact that it's beautiful, sunny, blue skies from the inside of my home. Yep. There is no link between the fact that it's nice weather and the obligation of being outside enjoying it.
I do appreciate that, because if you don't live in an area that's sunny all the time, you feel extra compelled and pressured to seize the day on the sunny days. And like, nobody needs that extra pressure. Like, what if you're sick? What if you're tired? Like, what if you're emotionally just having a rough day and you don't want to go outside? Like, it's good to give yourself that grace almost and say, you don't have to be outside. But I do want to bring something up, because I brought it up with the collective literally like 2 days ago or yesterday or something. And that is, you can be outside without moving. And I think so many people, especially women, are taught like to stop, like the only form of activity they're allowed outside. Because, boys play sports and all that, but girls, it's like once they hit like 15, 16, they kind of just have walks and running if they want to move outside, maybe hikes. But I just have to remind everyone, you can like grab a blanket and like read a book under a tree. It doesn't have to be an excuse to excessively move just because it's a nice day out. Like, take your iPad, I don't know, what am I saying? Ear pods, like listen to a podcast and like chill in the sun, right? Or read a book or call a friend on your front porch, right? You can enjoy the sun in so many ways. And just wanted to let people know, like, you can have the outdoors without the excessive movement. So a little bit of a side note, but I did want to point that out.
Actually, extra side note, because I did that actually in recovery, is if it's still hard and you're like, yeah, but it's such a good thing, the sunshine, or if you're like me and you tend to isolate when you're not well, and actually it's a goal for you to go outside of your home, your apartment, because that's what you tend to do, and it's not helpful. Combine that with another goal that is hard. For example, I sort of set this new guideline with my therapist at the time that if there was this sort of a situation where it was nice weather, I was like, now I have to seize the day. And that kind of makes it easier for me then to go out of the home, which is good because I tend to stay in and isolate. We would sort of combine that with, okay, so go out, go into like city center of Brussels, find a little cafe, sit outside, order a hot chocolate and something, and like make it into like something that's actually helpful for your recovery, but sort of like, like seize that as an opportunity to something good for you and use that to your advantage, sort of a thing. So just an idea, because you reminded me of that when you were.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. I love that. It's like, again, you can be outside and enjoy the sun in so many ways that supports your recovery. So it doesn't look like going on a run. It looks like a nice peaceful walk to a cafe and sitting outside and having a croissant in the sun. Like there's nothing better.
And it was my way of making sure that the balance would tilt towards recovery. Because you know how, in this literal example, going out is both helpful and potentially unhelpful. And so it was hard to be like, should I then do it or should I not? Like, because it's hard. It's like, but it's good for me because I tend to isolate. So it's good for me to actually go out. But then it's not good because then I'm shooting myself to go out because it's nice weather. And then I'm actually just moving a little bit more to go to a place or to go outside. And this allowed me to clearly tilt the balance in favor of recovery from doing that extra thing. And so that made it easier and better, like for me to just be like, oh, okay, it's fine. Like this is actually a healthy self-choice. When I wasn't calling it that way at the time, but if you think of similar situations where one choice can sound like both, think of how can I make it more clearly a recovery choice? And maybe you'll find extra ideas and you can be creative here.
I like that. That's a very good piece of advice. I wanted to add some things. We'll never get to our topic.
We will get to it next time. How about that?
Yeah. Our relationship with the sun is like, it can come from a feeling of abundance or scarcity, just like food. And so like we both live in areas where like the sun is scarce, which is why we've had moments where we're overthinking the sun. We're like, when is it coming back? Am I going to have a nice day again? Oh my God. Is this my last opportunity before the weather like turns to winter? Like, it's like you start to overthink. It's just like when you limit food. There's that scarcity mindset. Of course, like your relationship with the sun doesn't turn into an eating disorder or anything like that, but you can see how scarcity impacts thoughts, right? And puts a little bit more pressure on you to maximize that opportunity. It's like when you're limiting food and you finally give yourself permission to eat, you feel like you have to overdo it or that you're out of control because it's like that little window of opportunity that you have, right? So people who live in really sunny environments probably don't think the way we're thinking with that limited sun mentality all the time. So I don't know. It's just an interesting comparison, not something to like, I don't know. That's pretty much all I have with that.
It is interesting to notice where in life we interact with what's coming up in terms of, like you said, scarcity or abundance. And it's interesting to make sure that you combine that with the layer of what is actually inside of my control. Because clearly with the food, you get to choose whether or not you're allowing yourself to get the thing. When it comes to the weather, give yourself understanding that if you're living, for example, in Brussels or in Connecticut, maybe you're missing the sun and it's okay to sort of have that, oh, I want to enjoy it, like thing that pops up. Give yourself the understanding, give yourself a break, like you're just human. That's cool, like fine. And get extra clear on the fact that it's just weather and you can't be dependent on weather. Like, in the same way that I'm glad my husband sits on the couch and tells me that he's in a bad mood because of the weather and doesn't find something else to blame, or drags that mood into other things. It's important to take ownership, and say like, okay, well, I'm not going to give my power to the weather because how does that make sense? In the same way that I'm also not going to give my power to food or my eating disorder by not actually taking back control over whether or not I'm in a situation of scarcity or abundance. My husband would disagree and say, yes, that's why we plan vacations in March to go and see the sunshine. But, that's a very privileged thing to be able to discuss. So, but, if you can do that too, do that with the weather too.
I love that distinction. I'm glad you made it. It's like you have the power to have 100% access to food, AKA all the sunny food days, in your life. Like that scarcity you are creating, unless you're coming from a place where access to food is limited, but if you have access to food regularly and enough, you can have that abundance mindset around food, and that decreases the disordered thinking and the obsession around food. Where if you're in a place without a lot of sun, that's out of your control,
Yep.
Unless the only thing you can do is move to a sunnier place or go on vacation, which is not really what we're advising today.
No. I wanted to link that because, we're just rolling with this theme at this point. You just made me think of how that's linked to mental hunger so very much. And when we get out of famine mode, out of, we've starved our body, basically, when we go on a diet, when we're sick, it's basically starvation. And we know from the Minnesota semi-starvation experiment that it's not just physical restriction, but also mental restriction. And so I want to remind people that this unconditional permission to eat and the scarcity around food is both in you doing it and in you commenting on what it is that you're doing. So when you come to food and you tell yourself, well, I can only today and not tomorrow, or this is the last time, or only if, or I can do that because blah, that is not unconditional permission. It's like maybe you're eating it, but be like really aware of what else you're attaching to it in terms of internal commentary, because that can still be restriction and that can still create that internal feeling of, well, actually, this isn't abundant because a part of me is telling me that this is coming to an end, or I shouldn't, or I can't. You know what I mean? So I just wanted to throw that in there because you just made me make that link.
Right. There is that mental commentary that needs to be had as well, which is such a good point, because you could be acting from abundance in that moment. But if you're telling yourself this is the last time, and then you're going back to your strict rules, you're still going to have that little panic in your heart thinking, oh, shoot, I'm not going to get this again. And so that's what creates a lot of disordered patterns, compensatory behaviors. It's just the unconditional permission needs to be legitimately unconditional for you to take food off of its pedestal, which is usually where it is, and bring it down to where it's supposed to be, which is it's a neutral, normal experience. And you can have that several times a day in abundance and actually start to be intuitive with it. And the intuition happens with that unconditional permission.
I love that.
So I guess we're good. This was a topic in itself.
So that was the non-planned at all episode for today. We hope that you enjoyed, and we will actually be back with the question that we had planned for today next week, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so.
Oh, well, it's nice winging it with you, Meg.
Nice winging it with you. Okay, well, thanks everyone for watching. Bye and clear. Mwah.